And I think we're live. I
It
sure
says
hope.
on air,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
would hope.
So one thing that happened, this is why I didn't tell you before, but right before we jumped on, all of this stuff came crashing down on my mixer.
Oh no.
So when I couldn't hear you, I was like, "Oh shit, this thing's busted." It broke somehow, some way.
Well, that's
Uh,
okay. This is my second live stream today, and I've now been late to both of them.
nice.
So this morning I was like, I came down, I had time. I was like, I'm on at 8:35 a.m. Mountain time. And I was like messing with it. My microphone wasn't working, ironically. So I had to restart my computer. And I was like, okay, I still have a few minutes, but I guess I'll hop in the waiting room. And I go to click on the link and it says 8:25.
Uh-oh.
Was the time of my interview, and it was 8:29, and I was like, "Oh, crap." Like,
Who was that
I
with? Probably a better
Cowboy State Daily. It's a Wyoming, news channel. They were covering the grant for the
the
research
Grant.
center, but they seem to be really good. Like, I came in, like, waiting to apologize, and he was riffing like nothing had happened, so,
Yeah,
yeah, it was
yeah.
fine.
That's
He was a
awesome.
professional.
Yeah,
I was
for
not.
sure. Well, now that we got that out of the way, I mean, if you don't know who Ashley is, you probably live under a rock, especially if you're in the gun industry. I think if you're in the gun industry, not necessarily a gun owner, but I think if you're in the gun industry, you do YouTubes and all that stuff, you should know who Ashley is. Um, I'm gonna let you do that because I think it's always weird, and I may be wrong because you hear this all the time. People talk about you and say the stuff about you, and I want to say the stuff that you want to say to the world.
Well, I
Because there's
appreciate
a
that.
lot. Because there's a
Yeah.
lot.
There's been a lot of stuff said the past couple of days that weren't what I would say about some of the topics I'm researching on, which we can talk about. But so I would say that a lot of people don't actually know who I am.
Okay.
Maybe like back when I was at the Cody Firearms Museum. Oh, hi, I'm Ashley. I'll explain why nobody knows who I am here. I'm a firearms historian and I'm a full time consultant. So I've got my hand in a lot of cookie jars, working on gun projects. But I'm most well known for running the Cody Firearms Museum in Wyoming for 10 years. And if you are not familiar with the Cody Firearms Museum, you should be. It's a museum that's a part of a complex out in Cody, Wyoming. It's a very clever name, I know. And it's 5 museums. There's a art museum, natural history museum, Buffalo Bill Museum, who founded the town of Cody, Wyoming. His name was William F. Cody. Plains Indian Museum, and then the Firearms Museum. And so it's a huge museum. It's the American Alliance of Museums accredited museum, which is a big deal because only 5% of all museums are accredited, and it's the only firearms museum that is accredited. And so it's great. When I was there, I was responsible for a full rebuild of it. We reopened in 2019, and now I'm kind of a free agent and kind of not. I started a research center at the University of Wyoming that I run as the executive director. I just started another research center with a bunch of colleagues in the UK called the Center for the Study of Arms History. I'm building a bunch of museums. I work with the LA Police Museum, the Mob Museum. I'm building a couple of museums for gun companies. I'm building a machine gun museum in Canada. I don't know, other history projects. And then I do TV, which is why people don't know who I am because nobody watches TV anymore.
Yeah.
Uh,
You've been
I,
on the History Channel primarily, right?
no, actually, Discovery. I don't think I've ever been on the History Channel. I've written and produced shows on history, but I don't know if I've ever actually done anything on camera. But I had a show, a short-lived show on Discovery Channel, and I've been on Discovery a ton. I was on Nat Geo. I was on Travel Channel before it became the Trivial Channel when they removed the vowels and made it all ghosts. And took out the shows about history, and yeah, so I've done that, but because I don't have like a concentrated YouTube channel or really like a big social media presence, I tend to think if you're like old school, you may know who I am, and if you do know who I am, you probably struggle to recognize me because I change my hair like every 6 months.
um, that's a resume. That is
Yeah, it was
that
a
is
lot. I just
that is quite the resume. And basically it's history. I always appreciate your knowledge of um of everything history, and for me, it's always fascinating to understand how guns work. I think it's pretty undervalued, especially in the end user side. The history of the thing that I use for recreation, defend myself. We're primarily self defense humans, Isaac and myself, but just overall, just hunting and all that stuff. And I think we don't appreciate it as much just because we don't understand the history of it. So it's always fascinating to have humans like you who will do the history for us.
You know, it's interesting because I used to always say, like, people don't listen to history. They need to listen to history.
Yeah,
And I still believe that, but
yeah,
it's the least sexy topic. So like when we
for
were
sure.
redoing the museum and I was trying to fundraise, people were like, "Oh, but people are throwing money at you." And I'm like, literally no one. And like we always, get kind of jabs at the museum and the research center for taking money from gun companies. And I'll be like, "Do you know how much money gun companies like give to other people?" It's not a necessarily history's not a sexy sell for a lot of projects and a lot of companies that only have marketing departments, so they don't have like foundations. They have to be able to justify why they're putting their name in a gallery of a museum. And so it's this thing I've always dealt with, where it's this really important thing but not necessarily something that is as exciting as something that's incredibly political. But I am starting to kind of change my tune a little bit because of the Bruin decision, which is a Supreme Court decision in 2022, which you heard me talk a little bit about when we were at our conference. It was a couple weeks ago, where they basically made history like the most important determinant to deciding the constitutionality of a firearms law. And I was like, well, that's really exciting. But now watching like all the historians like battling it out and the lack of firearms knowledge in the academic community, I'm like pretty horrified. So I don't know if anyone should be listening to us ever.
Yeah, that's super interesting because we've ran into this with here in the state of Colorado. We like to butt heads with sheriffs, especially when they're doing what we believe to be unconstitutional stuff and stuff that violates our rights as gun people. And now with that Bruin decision, is there's a lot of historical thing, even for concealed carry. That's a relatively new thing. Permits to carry concealed handguns is a relatively new thing.
Well,
Go ahead.
I mean, there were so what's interesting about kind of the history of firearms laws and is that when you I guess maybe should I say what the Bruin decision is? I'm
Go
assuming
for it.
people know what I'm talking about. Okay. So the Bruin decision was a Supreme Court decision in 2022 that, like I said, basically determined that history was really important to whether or not you could consider a modern gun law constitutional. And what they did with that ruling was they created something called the Bruin test. And the Bruin test is basically a hierarchy of important historical time periods when evaluating these laws. And the most important time frame, I'm very much oversimplifying it, but number one is the founding era, which is around the ratification of the Second Amendment. And Bruin only looked at the founding era. So all the subsequent eras don't necessarily need to be considered in a court of law unless you can make a reasoning for it, a justification for it. And you can a lot of the times, or judges
Yeah.
rule that you can a lot of times. So the second most important is the second founding era, and that's around the ratification of the 14th Amendment. So that's 1868. And then you get pre and post enactment history, which is important. The pre, because it tells you what the state of the culture was at the time of the ratification, and then obviously the post is then how did they immediately implement it. And then the least important time frame is the 20th century, which is kind of funny because so much of the feature-based firearms laws, your magazine capacity restrictions, your assault weapons bans, those kind of have more of a root in the late 19th, early 20th century. I'm happy to talk about how that came about. But what there are and what people try to point to, at least in the 19th century. So you'll see a lot of times people pushing into the second founding era
Mhm.
in a lot of these court cases, is that there were carry laws. And actually, if you've never had David Yamani on the program, you should, because he wrote a book called Concealed Carry Revolution, and he studied the history of may and shall issue laws. And he goes back to, these 19th century laws. So when you're looking at firearms regulations, or you're arguing in a court for a firearms regulation, when you do, let's say with a magazine, or no, I'll use assault weapons ban because that one
Yeah.
gets thrown around a lot in the way to justify. So, if you're trying to find what we call a historical analog, so what you're trying to do is establish what technology existed in these different time frames, and then what technologies existed, did people know about them, and were there laws? And the important part of did people know about them is because if they didn't know about them, how would they know to regulate them? So in the 19th century, you do start seeing statewide laws on carry, because people, and what's funny is it's on concealed carry because people, open carry a lot of times because people found, I'm backwards on I'm drinking coffee. It's terrible. It's 7 o'clock at night, my time. So those laws are regulating concealed carry because people found concealed carry to be nefarious. Like, what are you hiding? Why can't you open carry? Which is kind of an interesting conversation with a lot of people who don't like open carry today. But those laws went into play, and sometimes they would say, you can't carry this type of knife or a cane gun. It was always crazy stuff too. But there were sometimes like different types of firearms that were included in this type of carry. And they'll use that as a justification for a firearms based restriction. But reality, it's actually a conversation about carrying. You could own the gun, you could open carry it, but you couldn't necessarily concealed carry it. And so that's where they'll point. So there were concealed carry, there were laws that regulated carry, but it's interesting to trace it too in the 19th century because a lot of times they're put into place and they're repealed pretty quickly or within 10, 20 years, or they're specifically there to keep guns out of the hands of people that they did not want guns in the hands of. And I'm talking about antebellum
Racism.
South.
Yeah. Yeah. The racism stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting. There were concealed carry laws, but they were more anti-concealed carry than they were in favor of concealed carry, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Correct. Yeah, you could open carry, but you couldn't concealed carry necessarily in some areas. And you saw that in lots,
Yeah,
you saw that in places like you couldn't carry in some Western towns. That's true. There were some Western towns where they would ban the carry of firearms. You'd have to turn your guns in when you
correct.
went into the town. And so that's where a lot of the times when people are trying to push to talk about regulation, they try to push into the night or yeah, the 19th century, because you can start looking at these laws. But there's a lot that goes into it. It's not really my specialty, shall and may issue laws, but
Correct.
there is, I would say, more of a historical lineage that people can fight over there than there is for the technology piece. I mean, they still fight over the technology piece, but it's a little bit weirder of a conversation.
Yeah, this is where I wish humans would be into the history a little bit more. Because I've argued that point before where you just talked about where you turn your gun in, where when people tell me in classes, "Oh, well, back in the 1800s, everybody could carry a gun." I was like, "Well," like there's famously a lot of towns where they restricted anybody from carrying a gun other than law enforcement.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but they make their argument based off of what they believe to be real. And it's just like, no, like the US for a very long time, and you could argue today, is not as pro gun as we make it out to be. I mean, we can look at other countries to be as equally pro gun as we are, just differently.
Well, what's interesting? I'm learning a lot since I'm spending so much time up in Canada that Canadians were actually, if you want to use the pro gun term,
Correct.
Canadians were actually far more pro gun than the US because they never had a National Firearms Act.
Correct.
So they were collecting machine guns whatever they
Mexico.
wanted until they until they banned them in the 70s,
Yeah.
and then it's really only been very recently that these heavy restrictions have been put into place. I didn't know that. That's not, the narrative you hear, in Canada
Correct.
today. And so when I was like looking at these collections, they're like, no, actually, we had like way more liberal gun laws
Correct.
than the US did because we never enacted the NFA or the GCA. And then it was 70s. I want to say it was like 78 when they started hitting in on machine guns. So around the same time, the US started hitting in on modern machine guns.
Correct. Yeah, Mexico doesn't have the NFA, and SBR down there is common. In fact, there's many times where they do sales where if you buy this rifle or this SBR, we'll give you a silencer for free. So like we'll just give you the silencer as that's your
Well, that's
freebie.
another I mean, that's another thing. I mean, the silencer thing is such a weird thing in the US that's not as big of a deal in other parts of the world. You
Correct.
know, there are definitely still countries that don't want, like Italy, I think they're
Correct.
banned in Italy. I think they're banned in Canada. I don't know if they're completely banned in Canada. But you know, but it is one of those things that like in other parts though of the world, it's like you can buy it off the rack, you know, it's not a big deal. It's not this scary silent tool.
Correct.
And I love the history of the silencer. And you'll hear me say silencer just because it irritates people, and it's because it's the historically correct term. It might not be the technically correct term, but it is the historically correct term. And it's really funny. I like to say things like that. You'll hear me probably drop the words assault rifle a couple of times because that is also a historically rooted term. I just like
This
to piss people off. It's fine.
this is this podcast, by the way. It's you will find the reason we're not super popular, I think, aside from the fact that we're not super organized, it
I
is
understand that.
is the fact that we don't like to. I hate yes manning. I fucking hate it. I hate circle jerking. I like to challenge the norm, and it's not challenge the norm for the sake of challenging the norm, which is also fun. But it's we can't be better if we just say yes and say happy thing. I'll never live down our the little symposium we did. I'll never live that day down, especially from Sedini. Because afterwards, that's all Sedini was mentioning. This motherfucker told NS or the other organization that was there that is not. We're not supposed to say that they were there. I almost fucked up. I mean, people will know. It doesn't matter. But he didn't want people to know that he was there. And me telling that human that major organizations are not doing what they're supposed to do, like most people will just tippy toe around that shit.
Yeah.
But then we'll say it in at the bar. They will say it at the restaurant. They will say like, "No, the fucker's right here." Like I'm just gonna tell him to his face that they're not doing what the fuck they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And we're not very popular. So I get it. All that to say, I get it 100%. Saying words just to piss people off.
Well, you know, it's also a learning experience. I remember I used to have this video series for Recoil, and I did it when I was at Cody, and I did a video where the Cody Firearms Museum has this really cool selective fire rifle. It's called the Burton Light Machine Rifle, and it was created towards the end of World War One by a guy named Frank Burton, who was the son of James Burton. Oh, it looks like I lost somebody.
No, no, you didn't lose anybody. I
Okay.
just yeah,
You just zoomed in on me. I was like,
yeah,
"Oh man, that's my face." So James Burton, who modified the Minier ball, the projectile cartridge that we used during the Civil War. That was a big old tangent. This is what you get when you talk to me towards my bedtime. But the Burton Light Machine Rifle, it is a selective fire. It has twin top detachable magazines, single user portable, an intermediate cartridge firearm. It's really cool. There's only one that we know of that exists. It's in the Cody Firearms Museum, but it is in Battlefield One, I think. But it's used historically inaccurately because there was this weird myth for a while that they were using it to shoot down balloons, which is not true. There were no incendiary rounds made for it. But by definition, it is an assault rifle. I just said all those words, all that words go into the Defense Intelligence Agency's definition of assault rifle in the post World War II period. And so I'm standing there and I've got a Sturmgewehr, which people often think is the first assault rifle,
yeah.
because you know storm rifle and all of that. And I'm like, today I'm going to talk about assault rifles. And then I lean over the Sturmgewehr and I pick up the Burton, and I thought I was funny. But I get this text from Dave Merrill, who works for Recoil, and he's like, "Oh my god, I had no idea that people had no idea what an assault rifle was, and
Yeah.
that an assault weapon and an assault rifle are two completely different things because the like internet like collective mind exploded because people interchange assault weapon and an assault rifle. And now I will say the state of California did change the legal name of assault or legal definition of assault rifle, so it is one unit, but typically not. And it was just really funny because people were like, why are you using that fictitious term, rifles don't assault people? And I'm like, it's like I get it. And what I always tell people is you don't have to like the term, you don't have to use the term, but that doesn't make the term not exist. It doesn't make the
Correct.
term go away. It,
Correct.
like it doesn't just not poof, it's gone.
Correct.
Um and I dealt with that too, same museum, but with PBS, I did a special after we reopened the museum, and we were walking through a section called the Polymer Revolution on our timeline. You can guess what it was about. I actually originally had it called "Once You Go Black, You Never Go Back," but I did not. That didn't make the final cut of the script. But we were standing there, and we were standing in front of a display, and on the reader rail it said assault weapon, assault rifle, modern sporting rifle, what's the difference? And it was we defined all those different terms, and we're talking about it, and I use the term, I think I use the term assault rifle, and someone on my Instagram like came for me, and it was a woman, so like equality, I guess. It's not normally what I expect. She came for me and she was like, how dare you use a fake term in front of a case of, guns that are not assault rifles, because they were AR-15s. And then I thought it was kind of funny because I was standing in front of a row of selective fire AR-15s because original AR-15s were selective fire. So
Correct.
they do fit the assault rifle
Correct.
definition. So before they got, swallowed up, by Colt and were being made for the military, I mean, they were all selective fire. So
Correct.
Cody has a ton of selective fire AR-15s. So her point was made even more, invalid, because I was actually standing in front of a row of
Correct.
assault rifles. I tried to explain this to her, and I don't do this anymore, but I did try to like very politely like be like, okay, no, I totally understand that, blah 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 blah. And then I was like, oh, but also those AR-15s are selective fire, and I just didn't want to hear it. But I will still continue to say all of those words because there's like these amazing nuances in history too that like people don't realize. And I don't know. I guess I'm a pot stirrer now in my old age.
It it's yeah, it's fun. I just had a Reddit tangent, disagreement with somebody. Goes promoting a comedy thing that we're doing, and it's to raise funds for our suicide prevention efforts. And he says, "Well, you're a gun place, so you're not doing suicide prevention. You're doing firearms training." I was like, I get it. Yes, that is in the scope of what we do, but in the firearms training, we also talk about suicide prevention. We have a lot of actually suicide prevention specific classes and stuff that we primarily with instructors. But it's kind of to your point. It's just like the internet does not want to hear the nuances. The internet just wants to hear you ain't shit, you suck, you should never exist.
It's
It's
very, very true. It's why I don't have a YouTube channel. I'm getting
yeah,
pressured to do one, and I think I may finally be capable of handling mean comments, but the verdict is still out on that one. My social media, I don't really spend a lot of time on it, but I have a small but mighty following that's very nice to me.
yeah,
So I don't know if I want to, invite the hate, but I've been getting a lot of pressure about it. But it is true. I mean, the internet is kind of a toxic place, especially. I don't know. It's probably everywhere, but the gun world seems to be particularly rough from
yeah.
time to time.
The gun world is weird, and I've talked shit about it for a very long time. And again, probably why we're not as popular as we once were with the industry, anyways. With the industry, and I do want to talk about that a little bit with you because that was our conversation at the symposium, right? Is just what is the gun industry doing right and what is the gun industry
The
doing wrong?
firearms community was the phraseology.
Was it the firearms community?
It was the firearms community
Yeah.
because that was
Oh
why
yeah,
my
for
whole talk
sure,
was
for
about,
sure.
"Am I
Yeah,
a
yeah,
part
yeah.
of the firearms community?
Yeah, for
I
sure.
don't know if I identify as part of the
Yeah,
firearms
you're
community."
correct. I was looking at it from the gun industry point of view instead of people, because I do separate gun owners because I don't think gun owners are part of the gun industry. In
Yeah,
fact, your
I agree.
average gun owner couldn't give two fucks about what any gun influencer is doing or what you and I are doing right now. Like the average gun person is just, I just want to go have dinner right now and go to sleep. And
Well, and that's what we kinda came to the conclusion
correct,
because it was like the firearms community, like it's this unit, and that was kind of the conclusion, which is that that doesn't exist. You know, the
correct,
firearms community is like a forced label put on gun owners by people trying to make sense of gun owners, but not
correct,
understanding. Because it is true. I mean, like I mentioned it at the forum. I think I mentioned it about like talking to my husband when we first got together, and him being like, I don't understand why any gun owner would vote for, a firearms law in support of a firearms law or isn't standing up and you know, speaking out on the Second Amendment. And I was like, because sometimes being a gun owner is just owning a gun.
correct.
It's not somebody's priority. And the other one I think I mentioned was when I did an interview at SHOT Show last year, and the person who was doing the interview was a friend of mine, but and I didn't say anything on camera because it was too short of an interview. But they were like, to own a gun is to be a Second Amendment advocate, and I don't know if I believe that. I think to own a gun is to own a gun, and
Correct.
you do what you want with the relationship that you have with that.
Correct.
And so if you're just someone who owns guns, maybe shoots a little bit, I don't know if like that's firearms community, but and they are completely different than the industry. Because I would get lumped in with the gun industry a lot. And I'd be like, I'm not in the industry, but I'm
Yeah.
tangential to the industry. I
Correct.
float in,
Correct.
I work with gun companies, or gun companies, work with me and what I'm doing, and then I float out. I've never been, well, I guess now I have some clients that are gun companies, but I've never been an employee of a gun company, so it is a very different thing.
So from that perspective, then in that conversation, now that you have a little bit more time, because there we only had like 5 minutes each, and then we just yelled at each other. I think for the rest of the time, and it wasn't really yelling at each
We
other. It
didn't
was just
yell.
no, it was just having a conversation. Well, according to Sadini, I fucking held that person who shall not be named on the ground, and I told him, "You ain't shit, you little bitch."
I don't
Uh,
I don't I don't I don't think that. That was not my take
yeah,
on,
yeah, correct.
and I felt like he was very open to the conversation. He
He
didn't seem offended or anything. I was worried that I would be in trouble for saying, because I live on a tightrope in my career, because I'm an educator.
yeah.
So I don't publicly take a side. People project a side onto me. I think I mentioned, or maybe I didn't. I've been called a Bolshevik and a shill for the gun industry in the same 24-hour
Oh
period.
yeah, yeah, you did. Yeah,
So I walk a tightrope because it's not my job. Because like I said, I don't know if I belong in the gun community, right?
correct,
Quote unquote, because I own firearms, but firearms aren't my hobby. I don't go shooting for fun. I go shooting for work, if I need for research. But it's not really a part of my life outside of my work. And I love my work. So don't get me wrong. But having that, world, I've got my professional life. And in my professional life, it's not my job to have an opinion on where we stand on these laws. It's my job to be able to provide you with context and information so that you guys can duke it out, or you can make those
correct,
decisions. And a lot of people don't see me like that. On both sides, a lot of people see me very much like, oh, I'm super pro gun, or oh, I'm super pro gun control. Believe it or not, because I don't think a lot of people know that I get hit on that side too. But I walk a tightrope, so I'm very careful, or I have been very careful about what I have said in front of people in the gun world, because I don't want people to misconstrue what I'm saying. Because I'm trying to be fair and nonpartisan, does it mean that I'm taking a side,
correct,
against somebody else? It means I have to remain as impartial as I can, right? There's no
correct.
such thing, but an impartial observer, so that people can feel like they can come and ask me questions. So I was nervous. I actually talked to David the night before about that, because I
Correct.
was like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to say something that could hurt my career. I
Correct.
want to be open and honest in this forum, but there are people in this room that may be upset to hear me say I don't necessarily think I'm a part of the gun community,
Correct.
because that's probably because so many people don't really know me. A lot of people think they know me, but they don't really know me. And I think there's a lot of people I've known for many, many, many years, including the person we're talking about. I think I've known him for like 10 to 15 years now, but we don't really talk that much. So I was worried to share my feedback, because or my opinion, because I was like, this is me, you know, stepping a toe off the tightrope for like the first time in front of that type of organization.
Yeah, that's super interesting. This is what I don't think this is the only place where you could do it, but it seems like it is a for a community, industry, whatever it is we're gonna label it, that walks around talking about how the left is a bunch of snowflakes and cancel culture and all that shit. It does seem like they're fucking just on the edge of their seat waiting to just talk shit
To
to somebody,
destroy someone.
destroy
Yeah.
somebody, kill them, just end their life. It's super weird to see the internet, the gun Twitter, the gun Instagram talk shit about the left, but then they themselves do exactly that same thing, and I would say even more viciously.
Well, because
Um,
you're doing it to your own people,
yeah,
right? It's when you hate the other, that's still terrible, but it's an other. This is you're hating your own. How we say it, community. We said it doesn't exist, but this is literally what the panel sounded like. We're like
right,
the gun community, but it's not real.
yeah,
But no, it is pretty. I mean, it's pretty brutal. I said in an interview years ago. So I was an expert witness on a couple dozen Second Amendment cases.
mhm,
I talked about this at the panel where prior to the Bruin decision, as an expert, everybody loved me, or it didn't matter what side I was on because I wasn't coming in with this like, "Rah,"
correct,
and then post Bruin, I had to become the most evil person on the planet in order to try to throw me out as an expert. And so there was like huge push to find me saying something like hardcore. And that's obviously from the restrictive side, the restriction side, and that's where like I was so scared to even open my mouth for like years because they would hire people to dig into everything I've ever said, in on TV, on the internet, on my posts. And knock on wood, at least back then, they weren't ever able to find anything. So they had to assassinate me by association, things that, we would quote on the research center that was some other scholar that wasn't me. But so I dealt with this fear of being canceled significantly from that side, but I also never really felt like I had support on the side I was hired by. And I lived a really weird world where I was like, well, I don't think that I have a place to fall back if, someone were to really come after me super, super hard. And I said in the interview, sometimes I think the only thing that pro gun and pro gun control people can agree on is that we blame mental illness and we use that to target
yeah,
someone as an enemy,
yeah,
because that's what I went through because I am someone who has diagnosed mental illness and I was getting hit by I don't say I don't like the left, I almost said the left, but the pro gun control and the pro gun community, I was getting hit, batted around so bad on both sides. I was like, I feel like the only thing y'all agree about is that you're mad at me for some reason.
and by the way, for the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so fucking weird. It's so weird.
Well, we just the research center just got this grant, and we could talk about that later. But what I think is really funny is that it's a Second Amendment initiative to work with secondary high school civics and government teachers. And it's from the Department of Education, which, people like instantly the gun world was like, oh, the Trump administration did this. And I'm like, well, no, actually, like the people who review grants are teachers across the nation that have, nothing to do with the actual department. They're brought on to do this. So this is a collective thing that transcends, the administration. And it was really cool. I never thought we would get it because of that. Because was like the people reviewing this, don't know guns, maybe don't like guns. Are they ever going to do this? But the structure that we put in place is nonpartisan to the point where we have webinars and things set up where we're bringing in people with opposing viewpoints to have dialogue with teachers so they can engage and hear both sides of the argument. And so this is
Yeah.
really like carefully structured things so that we can actually have conversation. And immediately the whole gun community was like, pro 2A curriculum going into schools. And I was like, what? I was like, shh, shh, shut up. Like, one, we're not writing curriculum, right? And two, like, that's not, did you read the press release? Because that's the opposite of what we were saying that we were going to do. And so I was talking to my communications person about it. And I was like, well, what do I do? Because like, I want to make it clear, like, that this is something that is nonpartisan and like, it's not a bad that's not a bad thing, but it's also shouldn't be something that upsets either side. And they said, well, the gun community is going to paint it one way, the gun control community is going to paint it another way, and so you can just all you have to do is stick to your story. And I
Right.
was like, no, they're painting it the same way. That's the problem. They're in agreement here.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm
S
sitting here being like, guys, it's not quite it's not quite what you think it is. Please read the press release.
Correct. Yeah, it's I don't know, it's frustrating, but I mean, it helps you 'cause it gets the word out, and it talk about that. What is the grant for? Expand on that.
So the
Um,
grant, it's pretty exciting, although I honestly did not expect us to get it. Like, not even in the slightest. Like, I had like 10 days to write it. And we were just like, we'll just get some experience writing grants. And then my colleague George was like, we got the grant. And I was like, what? I was like, now I have to do more work. Um, so the grant, it's called Armed with Knowledge, which is really funny to watch it now in all of the headlines, because I'm like, no, I came up with that like, this is funny. Like, I didn't see it in headlines. I just I like puns, and so it's called Armed with Knowledge, and it's a nonpartisan Second Amendment initiative. And so what the Department of Education was doing was they were funding civics oriented projects in honor of the 250th. So it's a civics grant. We just because we are a firearms research center, obviously we're not focusing on the other amendments. We'll focus on the Second Amendment, and it's also one of the least discussed in the classroom. And
correct,
that's because teachers, report that it's so difficult. It's like there if you're no matter what side you sit on as a teacher, it's
correct,
almost impossible to get information, correct information, to access information, to be able to vet and know what information
correct,
is correct, and then to teach it in a school system to students who are also, constantly bombarded with, news about shootings, and, schools that are short staffed on mental health professionals, and the depression epidemic within students. I mean, like, this is a really hard topic. So
correct.
I don't know what I'm doing. Um, to discuss, but it's really important because this is one of the most contested topics that we discuss nowadays, and we need to learn at a young age how to have this conversation. And so the initiative really, it's the reporting on it's not right per se. They call it curriculum. It's not curriculum. We're really just providing teachers with tools and access, because it's more for me about the teachers than it is the students. The students will get a trickle down effect, but the teachers are the ones that are floating around out here trying to make sense of something that they don't need to spend all their time on, right? And the teachers themselves are bringing their own bias, and infuse politics into it. So I'm really wanting to work with the teachers. So we are creating 12 instructional videos. They'll be kind of like short videos that you can play in the classroom, on different Second Amendment topics. So obviously there'll be a video on the textual, history of the Second
Correct.
Amendment, but the militia and the colonies, the second founding era, and the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and the 14th Amendment, which is a very important time frame for firearms history, technology, data, the Gun Control Act, and the evolution of different national federal laws. Heller, of course, McDonald, Bruin. So these videos that are not like there is no opinion on them. It's just like the Heller decision said this, not the Heller decision said this, and that means this. It's just it said this. And that's kind of a nice little instructional video, the one for the teacher, because they may not have that information, but then also they can
Correct.
show it in the classroom. And then we've been working on this, and the grants allowing this to be a bigger deal, a historical firearms law database. So you'll be able for free to access all the historical firearms laws in the history of the United States, and not just access the laws, but also PDFs of scans of the original
You're talking about
document.
all of them?
Mhm.
Like
We've been working on it for a while. The grant is allowing us to add features to it.
uh-huh.
And the Duke Center for Firearms Law has one as well. But ours is going to be a little bit more comprehensive. We're going to have scans of the original documents. And so we're adding an AI feature for teachers. That'll be kind of a summative tool, help them navigate, the different keyword searches and everything. So they're not just like, oh, thanks, this is all gun loss. And then we're doing kind of engagement with teachers. So we'll have a virtual webinar series where we'll pick topics that are in the modern discussion. So the videos and a lot of that stuff's history, but what are the topics that are coming up nowadays? And we'll bring in, like I said, a scholar from, it doesn't, I say scholar, but I'm actually thinking it's not just going to be scholars because they're not always the best representatives. Sorry. But somebody who okay, so ERPO, right? So somebody who is against extremist protection orders and someone who supports them,
Correct.
and get people that know what they're talking about, have a background and are respectful about it. And we'll do kind of like a background on, what that is, what are red flag laws. And then we'll let the person, that's pro red flag laws, talk about what their argument is. And then, the person that's against them, what their argument is. And then basically their platform. And then
Correct.
they open the door for the teachers to then ask questions of the people and dig deeper and have conversation. We actually did this to some extent at my conference with my colleague George Moxery, who is in his professional work, not affiliated with the Research Center, but in his professional work, a Pro 2A scholar, and a colleague Megan Walsh, who is the director of the Gun Violence Prevention Clinic at the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
So two people who usually sit on different sides of the gun debate. And they came and we actually talked about the founding era and how these same laws are being used on both sides of the conversation. So it's kind of an expansion of that. So people can see that you can take the same thing and have a completely different perspective on it. But then also there are points where we agree, which people were kind of surprised at our conference that there were a lot of points where Megan and George actually agree. So there'll be that series, and then the kind of capstone will be funding 100 teachers to come to a location not yet determined. I have to price it because Wyoming is really hard to get to. So I want people to be able to act. I want it to be really accessible. So I might need to move it into an urban area. But there'll be a 2-day conference. The first day will be dedicated to different topics within the Second Amendment, different scholars from different disciplines, working with the teachers to understand the material. And then the second day are going to be workshops. So we'll be workshopping, teaching teachers how to answer difficult questions, because obviously in today's climate with schools, you're going to get uncomfortable questions in the classroom. And how do you drop maybe your perspective of it, and how do you address this question in a way that is productive? So kind of working and vetting that. And then we will have, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we always at the Research Center have a mental health component to everything. It's one of our core missions is suicide prevention. So we will work with Walk the Talk America, and we have partners with the Wyoming Department of Health and the VA to do some level of firearm safety and mental health training for the school system. So letting teachers, because it is one of the bigger issues that we deal with, especially in the state of Wyoming. So that's many different things that have to do with the grant. But as you can see, none of which are like, me trying to force my opinion on anybody. It's really just providing teachers a way to have tools for the classroom and resources for the classroom, but then also giving them an opportunity to engage with the people, that
Correct.
they hear stuff about, engage with those people and make their own conclusions, rather than being like, I support guns and, GOA says this, this, and this, or, I'm against guns and Everytown says this, this, and this. Like, we all know our own talking points, but
Correct.
let's actually digest those. What do those talking points even mean? And then how are other people viewing the same topic but differently? So I'm actually really excited about it. I really hope people will give us a chance. I worry. My mom already had an interaction today with a social studies teacher at her high school where she goes like, "Oh, by the way, my daughter's doing this," and she was like, "Yeah, yeah, I know." So
Whoa.
I hope that people will give us a chance. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of people being like, "Oh, the Trump administration and pro Second Amendment and all of that." There's going to be a lot of that baggage, which is going to be off-putting to a solid portion of the population. And I just really, really, really hope that both sides, the spectrum,
Correct.
gives it a chance. It's not be a force feed propaganda, program. It was accepted by a panel of blind, not blind people, but a blind review of
Correct.
people from across the country. It was not one decision. So ignore all the words that might upset you, and give us a try, and if you don't like it, that's fine. And that goes for everybody, because I think that the gun world will probably be a little irritated when they hear some of that we're going to welcome in scholars that don't like guns, that's just a part of it. It's how you are intellectually honest. If you believe your side is right, then what is the harm of inviting someone else in to have a conversation? Is that scary? I don't know. Did I just cancel myself?
Well, I
I
don't
don't like your
I hope
pause.
I hope not. I'm just one of the things that I've learned that I need to do is just take a pause, because you just said something that I just cancel myself, and my visceral reactions, fuck them. Like, who gives a fuck? Fuck them all. Um, but at the same time, so like I already said it, but I the pause was just that. It's just me like just not wanting to say that. Um, it is unfortunate that there's a lot of, so we face this all the time. Our name is Guns for Everyone. So guess how much funding we get from organizations?
Yeah.
Zero. Like we've tried, and so it sucks. Um, I mean, I'm glad you're funded already. So I'm glad you're funded, but obviously to continue the funding,
Yeah.
there has to be some sort of reception there. And people underestimate how incredibly expensive this shit is. Like, once you start mentioning just creating a database for teachers to have access to, like that alone, the database is incredibly expensive. I don't have to tell you. I just want
Yeah.
the humans to know how expensive it is just to have the database, let alone the man hours to source all of the information and feed the database, and then and try and implement AI into it, which I don't know how much I like AI at this very moment, because it's wrong
Yeah,
half
I
the
have
fucking
I
time.
have thoughts and feelings, but it's worth having something. Although currently Google AI is really upsetting me, because Google AI has decided that my grant is a pro 2A curriculum, because that's the NRA headline. Thanks. I was like, damn it, AI, you're wrong.
You're wrong. You're
It was
right.
correct yesterday, because yesterday it was taken from our press release. And
Yeah.
then the NRA wrote an article, which they changed the title for me because it was real bad. I was like, guys, that's not helpful. Um,
ChatGPT tells humans that my first documentary, I'm on my second one, is when people ask it, does Ed Grantillon have a documentary? Yes. He directed The Negro and the Gun. Or something like that. It's some wild show. Like that's not even close. I had no part in that in any way, shape, or form. You're
yeah.
gonna get me. You're gonna get my ass beat. Is what the fuck you're gonna do, ChatGPT? Uh,
ChatGPT said that I got interested in guns because I found an old Winchester in an attic, which did not that did not happen.
that's weird. That's so weird. So I hope humans. This is where my push for humans to understand history, and even people who just own guns and are using them recreationally for self-defense, casual gun owners, to understand the history of them, or at least be interested in the history of stuff. I think this is when we start to ask the why, and get the answers to the hows, and all that stuff. But most humans just want to hear what they want to hear, and that's what I'm afraid of. So I hope you go past all that stuff and continue getting fun, because I think that's what I want for my kids. We homeschooled our kids because we don't
Yeah.
want the bias. We don't want honestly, even people who agree with us politically, I don't want them indoctrinating my kids.
Mhm.
I think my wife and I have done a decent job. You'd have to ask my kids, at not telling them what to feel, how to feel, why to feel it, where what politics to believe in, or anything like that. I think we've done a decent job at that. But that's one of the reasons why we never sent our many reasons, but one of the reasons why we didn't ever send our kids to public school is we just didn't want that level of quote unquote indoctrination. So it's always good to have, here's the info. Here's
Yeah.
the information. Do with it what you will, which is scary. Just
Yeah, it
kind of
is scary, yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because, if the roles were reversed, gun people wouldn't have a seat at the table in a lot of audiences. Obviously the conference we were at, not the case. And I work with lots of centers where that is not the case. So it is not exclusively the case on the other side. But if it were an administration driven thing, probably there wouldn't be a seat at the table for people with, gun perspectives. So I am trying to treat people the way I would want to be treated, which is to let people have a seat at the table to at least express their opinions and voice their opinions, kind of thing.
yeah. Yeah, this is interesting. You kind of threw a wrench in my gears a little bit because I did want to poke at your opinions a little bit. Uh, but I respect that you want to remain impartial and I don't know if that's the correct word. You just want apolitical, which I think is kind of the way to go. Um,
I sleep better at night. Well, sometimes.
sometimes,
I
yeah.
am currently stressed out about the grant. But,
What part of it?
more
The
just the
PR?
fact that yeah, like, I
Yeah.
want people, like I said, I want people to give it a fair chance, and I am a person that I am a nihilist. I've got worst case scenarios. I could
Oh
read the
yeah.
headlines
Oh
on
yeah.
both sides,
Yeah.
of how people would take this grant, and I've seen it now on one side, come true, and so that stresses me out. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have a YouTube channel because I don't like having my feelings hurt. And this might hurt. This might be an opportunity for my feelings to get hurt. So we'll see.
It's rough. It's rough. I think you and I are similar in that respect. It's just like I just want you to like it. So my issue is I deal with a lot of abandonment issues because my parents kicked me out when I was a teenager. This story is boring already for a lot of people who listen to us. So like I have this weird desire to like people not talk shit about me because I like just like me, god damn it.
I just thought
Uh
it was because I was a millennial.
So I get that whole feeling of like this shit is stressing me the fuck out. How stressful it is. I don't know. The gun community is super weird. This was my argument at that symposium that they called "What does the gun industry do wrong?" And I think they do everything wrong. I don't think they've done anything correct. And this is part
When
of
they
it.
make guns, wouldn't you argue that that's correct?
Fair,
So
fair,
that's
but
something.
I suppose. But outside of that is they almost foster the toxic environment. Like when you see 6 Hour treat their customer base like absolute fucking garbage, even if they're correct, like even if they're correct. Um I don't think that the gun industry does enough to educate the humans because I think they benefit from the humans not having enough information to buy their products. So I get that they're a business and they're trying to make money. I'm one of these weird capitalists where like I'm fucking 100% capitalist. I'm an anarchist. And I'm telling you, most humans who watch this, to the 4 people watching this, they probably already know this. But I'm telling you, I'm an anarchist. I'm more than anything else. But as a capitalist, I still feel that we have this responsibility to do what's right, and sometimes making money is not the correct thing. If that makes sense, this is why we do concealed carry classes for free.
Yeah.
Is that information should not be behind a paywall if we're genuine about teaching humans how to defend themselves and keeping them alive, if we're genuine about the Second Amendment. Because I do believe that once you start profiting off of buying your rights back, then it's just like, do you really believe in having absolute pro-gunish area? I don't know if that makes sense, but and the gun industry has created, they've almost benefited on anti-gun laws. um they've created this environment where anti-gun laws can pass. um this is, I'm only saying this right now, I may not agree with myself tomorrow, but I don't think they're serious about solving a problem, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. I don't think they're serious about solving a problem because the problem kind of helps their bottom line.
Well, and I think I don't know. I guess with the industry, I don't think as hard on that because
Yeah.
I kind of think a business is a business, and that it's kind of the same as like a gun owner, right? That can
Mhm.
just own a gun. Somebody who works at a gun company doesn't necessarily have a greater
Correct.
interest or desire about
Correct.
guns. So I don't necessarily think about it as
Yeah.
much in terms of the manufacturing and the guns and all of that.
Correct.
But I do, and this probably again might get me in trouble, but I do worry sometimes with the groups, like the rights groups, that if everything got fixed, you don't have any more support.
Correct.
And I'm not trying to accuse any one group or
Oh, I
anyone.
will. I will.
You can. I ain't gonna do that. Okay. But like, but like without the fear,
Yeah.
without the fear that's driving donations, then you don't
Yeah.
have the donations. So if we fixed everything like tomorrow in their minds, right? Like if there were absolutely no gun laws tomorrow and everyone could carry and all of that, you know, I think there are people who like existentially would be really, really happy, but as a machine, not individuals,
Correct.
as a machine,
Correct. Yeah.
then their money falls off. So what do you do now?
Yeah.
Because that's what I always used to, even with the both sides, the talking to my husband, who is a gun manufacturer, by the way, or works in the gun industry. So he's always got a really interesting perspective. But
Correct.
and it's really fun because we don't like always agree on things. We don't say, if you're the federal judge in Oregon, you think that I'm a brainless person that only believes what my husband believes. And if anyone has met either of us, you know that we don't agree on lots of things.
Correct.
But he works in the gun world, but we would talk about that and he'd be like, well, Ashley, people on the gun control side, they're just, these horrible people that want to take your rights away, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, like that seems like an oversimplification. I think there are a
Correct.
lot of people that want to see people not die, and that is
Correct.
a solid place to come from, right? And so I'm like, what you're looking at potentially is the machine,
Yeah.
the machine, and then there are
Yeah.
people who have their
Correct.
hearts in the right place on both sides. And so I think that's where gun rights and gun control, organizations to a lot of extent, they are the machine and there are good people there and there are people with good intentions that support them, but the machine has to stay operable,
Yeah.
and so I don't think any side will ever be out of business. I don't think either side will ever be out of business, but it is something that I do think about and I do watch. I There was a bill put out, and I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to call anybody specifically out, but it was something that was really cool and it was potentially bipartisan. And it was this really neat thing that I, personally, not in any of my professional capacities, was kind of helping with behind the scenes. And I was like, this is great. Like, we could finally do something important for, literally is the most boring, mundane gun thing on the planet. But um and then the bill was introduced and then the press release launched and it was like libtard this Trump this Democrats gun grabbing this and this, and I was like, what? Like, I was like, that this could have gotten bipartisan support. Like, what? This had nothing to do with like gun ownership or gun carry. This was like a history thing. And it was like that press release just nuked any chance that this
Correct.
had of being effective. And then I thought, really, morbidly, really, I guess I've gotten really dark in my exploration down the Second Amendment, world. But I was like, was that the point all along? Was to put something out there that was really cool and then, nuke it so that you could then turn around and say, see, they didn't want to support it. I wanted to preserve this, but they didn't want that.
Well, it is
You know?
politics. It is
Yeah.
politics, and I wouldn't put it past. I'm very nihilistic. In almost well, Isaac would tell you very unhealthy. I would say almost unhealthy. Um, but I do see it in politics. I ran for office twice. Technically, currently running for office right now.
Oof.
Uh,
Good on you. I didn't want that at all.
no, 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 for sure. And I'll tell you what, one of the reasons why I haven't been as public about my running for office is for your same fear of your the funding that you just got. It's just like, oh fuck, I just like how is this gonna receive? Because as soon as it starts to get out, like people are just gonna lose their fucking shit.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know what the fuck I was gonna talk about. Oh, but it's one, I think you're correct. I think I'm wrong in pointing out companies per se, but it is
And
this
but you're not wrong in the sense that there have been individuals that we are aware of throughout history that have maybe made or said things or done things that have, instigated or encouraged laws that restrict certain firearms, but maybe not others. So there are individuals, but I just think as a whole, I don't really think
yeah,
too much on that, and I'm not too
that's fair.
accusatory on
That's
manufacturing
fair.
for that. Yeah,
Yeah, that's fair because you do have the Wayne Lapierres of the world where they highly benefited off of donors, just 100% donors, and not we have an organization here, and I've talked shit about them enough, and I'm honestly indifferent about them. I've mentioned some things, but they they blasted a PSA that a local sheriff office said, and anything other than it's okay to text your friends' parents or your kids' friends' parents to see if their guns are locked up. It was that type of PSA. Is you're not weird for texting them and saying, "Hey, do you have guns? And if so, are they stored away and shit like that? Keep the kids safe." Well, according to them, that's the fucking most communist thing you could ever do, and you should never encourage that and all that shit. Mind your own business type stuff. I'm like, well, I mean, I get it. It shouldn't maybe come from the government, but maybe you should do it.
yeah,
They're like, maybe you should be saying literally the same thing and encouraging people to be responsible gun owners and keeping kids safe. Cause that's ultimately the message is like, hey, make sure the kids are safe. Because kids do find guns and unfortunately kids do kill themselves with guns. That's a reality. We can't ignore that. But the hyperbole is, oh, look at these communists. And like, well, we can agree that they're weird on some ends and they are tyrants and we can say all the buzzwords and shit like that people like to hear, but like on this is such a weird fucking thing to be calling them out on. So like it's
yeah. Pick your battles, kind of
cor-
thing. Yeah,
correct. So it's that's what I'm always concerned with the machine, as you say, is you talked about the suicide prevention thing, which is one of the big things that we have going on in you talk about your program, like how many amazing programs that are apolitical. It's not conservative, it's not liberal, it's not pro-gun, it's not anti-gun. It's just information to keep humans safe or informed, just plain and simple
yeah.
informed. But the hyperbole political, the politics, and not just politics in the Republican Democrat, but just in politics in general, have killed it. And I don't think the gun industry, whatever the fuck we're labeling it, or the gun community has done a good job at calling that shit out.
Yeah, and I would say I feel like I'm hearing it more. So I think I mentioned it at the conference, but maybe I didn't. The way I got, really connected with Mike with the suicide prevention
Sitting,
stuff. So with Walk the Talk was
yeah.
Cheryl Todd introduced us years ago with Gun Freedom Radio,
Oh yeah,
and I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder I don't know, a while ago, and PTSD, and it was kind of this wild thing because everyone thought I had depression and they gave me antidepressants. And fun fact about bipolar disorder is that if you get given antidepressants, it can make you manic. So I have bipolar too, so I don't have mania. I've got what's called hypomania, so I don't have delusions or hallucinations or anything like
uh-huh.
that. I always just say it makes me really efficient. But the problem with bipolar 2 is the depression is so much worse than bipolar 1, and the suicide
Okay.
rate is way worse for bipolar 2. People with bipolar 1 tend to die more because they think they're invincible. But people with bipolar 2 tend to take their lives more often because the depression is so bad. So it's this interesting thing. But I got thrown into a complete like hypomanic state through my antidepressants, and that's how I got diagnosed.
Yeah.
And it was funny, I lied on my little test because I realized partway through the test that they were about to diagnose me with bipolar disorder, and I was like, "Nope, I'm
Nope.
fine. I'm totes good." Like, and then it was like right before Thanksgiving, and I had this like existential crisis, and came back, called the psychiatrist like on Monday. I was like, "I need to see you," and he's like, "So why are we here?" And I was like, "Because I lied." And I think I have bipolar disorder. So I got diagnosed with bipolar 2, and I have PTSD for a couple of different reasons. And I was like, didn't want to say anything because, right, I didn't want to lose my career. And, I say this to a lot of my friends because a lot of my friends actually hate guns. I would say most of the people I hang out with are either indifferent or actually like
You
rabidly into guns.
communist.
I
You
know, I know. I
communist.
just I always have crazy colored hair. I attract it, I guess. I don't know. But it's also because this is not my personal life, right? Like my
Yeah,
personal life is cigars and whiskey and
correct.
strippers, but that's
Yeah,
another story.
nice.
Um, but yeah, so I was diagnosed and I was like afraid to say anything. And I initially like one of the reasons why I decided to come out was because I was getting tired of people on my page saying things like someone said, "Oh my God, thank you so much for what you do. If only crazy people didn't have guns, then everything would be okay." And I was like, but I'm crazy.
I'm
Like,
crazy.
I'm the crazy person with the gun. Like you don't even know. And
So
I was
many guns too.
so
So many.
so many guns. So I was like, "Wait, that's silly." And then I heard this ad, and it was a USCCA ad, and they have since pulled it. I was actually able to find when I sent the email because this is when I sent the email to Mike and Jake for the first time saying I want to help. Because I was like cooking in the kitchen. It was a radio ad, and it was like, it was like the crazy, wacky, inflatable, like arm person type of ad. And it was like, you don't want crazy people to get guns. Someone who'd want to hurt you is crazy. That'd be crazy. And like, I swear, I don't know how in like a 10-second
Yeah,
commercial you said crazy like 20 times.
yeah,
But I was like, I have like I don't snowflake on shit, I don't like it when people are mean, but I also don't get offended very easily.
correct,
Um and I was like, fuck this. I was like, that's ridiculous. And
correct.
I'm like, and coming from a big organization, I'm like, this is not okay. So I, messaged Mike and Jake and was like, hey, I want to talk to you guys. Like, this is not okay. And I did their podcast. And I think that's where I like came out as being crazy for the first time. I like to say I can use that term. I can use that term. But I've co-opted. I'm allowed to use it. Not everybody else is. But I feel like recently I've heard the word crazy come out of the mouths and mentally ill and mental health come out of the mouths of more and more gun people and conservatives because just conservatives regardless of their opinions on guns, but like from like politicians being like one thing we can all agree on is that you don't want someone with mental illness to own a gun. Somebody said that at my conference,
Correct.
and like I didn't say anything at the conference because I was running the webinar, but I sent him an email afterwards because he's a 2A scholar. And I was like, and he's like, there are some universals that we can all agree on. We don't want felons to have firearms. We don't want the mentally ill to have firearms. And I was like, no.
Um, and
Like,
I take exception to the felons one too, as well for kind of
yeah,
the same reason. It's the fuck does that mean?
exactly. What does that mean? That is what's like that's almost the crazy thing. That's the frustrating thing is because, it's fascinating to me that a group of people who are so obsessed with assault rifle, silencer, magazine,
Yeah,
these terms, that
these
someone who's
terms.
so
Yeah,
obsessed with terminology about guns throws the term mentally
correct,
ill around like it means like that it's a universal thing.
correct,
And it's so interesting. I wrote an article for Recoil about this, about how gun people should be the most understanding because they get frustrated that people don't understand their nuance. But
correct,
then the second we bring up mental illness, they're like, oh, crazy people can't have guns. And
correct.
like and it's an easy thing to latch onto, right? It sounds like it'd be a universal, but then you have to dig down deeper into it, and you find out that most people with diagnosed mental illness don't commit crimes. They don't commit violent crimes.
I mean, the
Uh,
number that do is so fucking tiny.
it's like 3% or something are like people who are like prone to violence or something like that. It's usually a compounding issue. So it's like,
I think
domestic
3% is
violence.
high. Like I'm gonna have to verify that number, but I thought it was way lower than that.
I think it's 3% are considered prone to violence.
But 3% of the population have been diagnosed.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. It's been a long time. I've got a book called The
Fair.
Behavioral
Yeah, yeah.
Science of Firearms. Yeah. I think it's people who have been diagnosed because that's the
Okay.
other part is that we're talking about diagnosed mental illness.
Correct.
But the other thing that I don't think people realize is that and I guess this is a debate, right? I'm not a mental health professional, so there's
Correct.
I'm sure a debate to say if you take a life that means that, you may not be diagnosed as having mental illness, but then you are mentally
Correct.
ill. But there's a lot of arguments like in The Behavioral Science of Firearms, which is a great book if you have, all the time in the world and want to read 800 pages. Um, it is like literally like 800 pages, but it's a great book. They talk about the fact that that violence is not necessarily intrinsically something that someone is mentally ill. And a lot of people who commit suicide don't have diagnosed mental illness. It's like a split second decision,
Correct.
right? So I think a lot of people get it in their brains that to pull the trigger on somebody else or on yourself means that you are mentally ill, and according to what I've read, that is not the case, that there are
Correct.
people that commit acts that are not considered mentally ill. They might be bad people, but mental
Correct.
illness, not necessarily.
Yeah, I've argued this with, and I've actually been pulled
I've
from.
got so blurry. I move too much. Let me see if I can make my face less blurry. Nope,
You're just gonna be blurry.
I just got a filter on now.
Yeah, I think usually they do this and that. That usually the hand thing. Yeah,
No, I
it's all
think
right.
I move too much. It was the
Yeah,
coffee.
I've had these discussions on TV. Excuse me. And plenty of them have not made the segments because I argue that because they tell me like, well, what do you think about mental health and firearms ownership? I was like, well, that's a conversation that deserves so much more respect than just mental health and firearms ownership. Like I'm not going to give you the soundbite.
Yeah,
I'm not going to give you this idea that anybody with the mental health has, because then I can't own guns. Like you heard what the fuck I said at the fucking thing. Like I don't
yeah,
want to live. Like I'm ready to fucking die. It doesn't mean I'm suicidal, but I'm sure if I went to a therapist, many people argue I should, but I'm sure if I went there, they would diagnose me with something, and there goes. I'm
well,
not
they
even a
have to. They can't treat you without a diagnosis, and
correct.
therein lies the rub.
Ah,
Yeah,
it,
you can't be treated without a diagnosis. The first time I went to a therapist, that was what they said. They're like, "I have to diagnose you in order to be able to treat you
that's weird.
for them
That's
for the insurance." I'm gonna
fair.
turn my camera off real quick and turn it back on and see if I get better.
Okay.
Nope.
uh, so
But yeah,
it.
no, it's yeah, well, and that's it, the actual like getting help thing and with mental illness is such a interesting conversation. That's I mean, because Mike will talk about red flag laws like all day long, but I mean, there's a lot that goes into that people don't think about when it comes to actually like getting help. That people are afraid to get help because they
Correct.
are afraid of losing their, firearms rights. And when I was doing my expert witness stuff and things were getting really bad and I was getting threats and it's really stressful when you've got multiple attorneys looking into everything you've ever said, and like the hatred that people had for me was really really hard, and I was in a really bad place. And although I also said, what's interesting is that, like, I would say that I definitely, was in a very, very bad place.
Mhm.
But I will say that if I was ever going to do it, I wouldn't do it with a firearm.
Yeah.
So it's interesting if you have that kind of mindset, like if you're ever in that kind of mindset, the fact that we assume it would be a gun, like I will never, like
Correct.
absolutely never. That sounds awful. Like
So my intrusive thoughts are like, why? I want to do
why I
why?
100% vehicle carbon monoxide in a garage. 100%. Like
Just
I
go to
no,
sleep. Just go to
yeah,
sleep.
I love naps, Like if I'm gonna do it, that's how we're going out, Uh
It's so weird.
it's
Um,
such a morbid thing, right? But
no, for sure. But here's the thing. I think this is another thing that the gun community, again, whatever the fuck we're calling it, gets wrong is people joke about this all the time, ha ha ha, and it's like, no, this is a real thing. Like we could joke about it and we can laugh about it, and to a certain degree, it's healthy about it. But I think we're so scared of talking about the suicide aspect of it, which is why I'm so open about it.
Yeah.
I make humans so uncomfortable, and I get it, and that's never my intention. And I'm sure if you talk to Pincus will fucking be like, oh, this fucking crybaby, he's just a little bitch, and she, oh, there you go.
Hey, look, don't
Yeah,
move. I'm just gonna
don't
stay
move
like
your
this
head.
for the rest of the call.
Uh, and 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 many people probably feel that way. I was just, here he goes again, just whining, and like, no, it just, this is the shit that I struggle with all the fucking time.
Yeah.
All the fucking time. So when we simply oversimplify something as just, oh, it's a mental health issue and people with mental health probably shouldn't have guns, it kind of feeds into the problem, and we can't, it gets us further away from solving the problem than it does
Yeah.
get us closer to solving whatever problem there is.
I remember long time ago. Did you were you in the industry world when Bob Owens was alive?
Mm-mm. Mm.
Bob Owens used to run Bearing Arms, and he was a really good dude. And I didn't know him very well, but at NRA, I can't remember how many years ago it was. I spent time with him. I like had like a 2 hour lunch with him, and this is before I ever went to see a therapist, and that was like a decade before I got diagnosed with anything real. But before I had ever gotten help, I was in this really horrible headspace, dealing with the fact that I was trying to raise money for the Cody Firearms Museum, and no one in the industry would give me the time of day. They would, I'd show up for meetings I scheduled months in advance, and they would just be like, "Nope," "Oh, sorry that like." I forgot about it. I already scheduled something. Sorry, and like, and it was just really grating on me. And obviously, I had a lot more going on chemically that I didn't know about, but I was exhausted. I had just gotten back from a trip from out of country, and I came straight into NRA, and it was like full throttle, and it was just awful. And so I was talking to Bob. We talked for hours, and we talked about how hard it is in the gun world, and a lot of the things that we talked about today. And I remember leaving that lunch being like, okay, at least somebody else gets it, right?
Correct.
Like, it's this is going to be okay, because like I'm not alone. This is the
Correct.
this is thing. So then, like, I think it was like a few weeks later, I'm scrolling through Facebook on my couch, and I see a post from Bob that says, "In the end, I'm really just the asshole," or something like that. And he shot himself. Turned his phone off and shot himself. It was awful. And then that's why I got help for the first time, because I remember thinking like, shit, he's like 20 years older than me.
Yeah.
I'm not in that place right now, but if
Yeah.
I don't try to figure my
Correct.
stuff out, like I could be there, right?
Correct.
And it was really interesting to watch, all of the media reporting on it, because I guess, he got a lot of hate from the gun control side. People called him a white supremacist and like all kinds of stuff. And I didn't know that, like, any of that, because I only had my personal interaction with him. And, but it was immensely respectful. Like, people, like, all of that hatred and everything that people had to him, like the Wall Street Journal, like the New York Times, like the articles were really good, and kind, because it was a big deal, because he was a big deal. There was actually, like, this past year or something, maybe last year, the Atlantic wrote a big article about him,
Yeah.
and they interviewed Sedini, and I think Sedini was in it.
How long
Jen
ago
Field,
was this?
Bob. Let's see, I had short hair.
That's how you that's
It was probably like 2016, maybe.
okay. So yeah, we were in. I just don't get
But
into
the Atlantic wrote something like last year or something,
yeah.
this huge long article, and dredged a lot of it up. But long story long, I was dealing with that, but then I went to an event, and someone who I was like really close with, still am really close with, pulled me aside and was like, "Oh, did you hear about Bob?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's so terrible." And she goes, "Why did he have to use a gun?" And I was like,
That's
"What?"
what you're hung up on?
I was like, did you just," and
Correct.
they didn't, like, the sincerity in their face, they didn't mean it to be inconsiderate or unkind, but I was like, "Did you really just say that?" Like, someone got to the point where they killed themselves. They were a father with children, and he got to a point where he didn't want to be here, and he ended his life, and your response is, "Why did he use a gun? Because that
Correct.
doesn't help our case." I was
Correct.
like, That's so freaking tone deaf. I mean, I
Yeah,
was like, that person is not like that anymore, but it was just like it like hit me like a ton of bricks. And
correct,
it's I guess it's one of those many moments where I say I don't feel like I'm necessarily a part of the community because I didn't come from guns. I didn't grow up around guns. I had
correct.
nothing to do with guns until I studied them academically. And so there's oftentimes I hear people say things like that and I'm just like,
The
"What?"
fuck? The
Like,
fuck?
yeah, the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, what? Like, you guys think so much differently than me. Maybe I don't understand what's going on.
But I think that's the need, and that's why we need to talk to the other side. It's not to agree, it's to understand the perspective so we can have a better argument for our position,
Yeah,
and understand our own hypocrisies. There's so many things that I'm super hypocritical about, and if anybody wants to spend the time, and you've probably heard Isaac and I on fucking these streams be like, "Oh, I'm a hypocrite about this," and we'll talk about why we're hypocrites. But I don't think enough humans realize the importance of listening to somebody else kind of talk shit about you,
yeah,
to you, um, and kind of highlight that. And that's the other thing that I believe is wrong in the industry is the secret talk shit behind each other's backs, and then 5 minutes later you'll see them high-fiving each other and
yeah,
circle jerking each other, and we don't challenge each other enough, enough. Because I would have told that person where the fuck that person is right then and there, like that's what the fuck you're hung up on. But I get your side is just like you're still
yeah. I'm like,
processing the information.
I'm one of those. I'm a people pleaser. I was just
Are
kind of
you?
like, "Oh,
Yeah,
cool." Yeah, no, I don't even know what I said. I think I was just like, "Yeah."
for sure,
Like,
for
I don't
sure,
know.
for sure.
But what's interesting, you said about making sure that, like, we talk to the other side, that was such an important, question that we had at the conference was that woman, I can't remember her name, the one who lost a child at
Yeah,
the Sandy Hook shooting, who asked us, as gun owners, like, "Do you think about the people who die?" And that's like no one really knew how to answer it because the answer is so obvious to us, right? That of course we do. Of
correct.
course, people think about that. And it reminds me of when I spoke at a conference years ago, and the end of the conference they did this community panel, and it was in Hartford, Connecticut, which is a pretty brutal, dangerous place. Has pretty high crime rate. It's not great. And Sam Colt and all that fun stuff. But it was a conversation about what we can do with the Coltsville National Historic Site, and it was a audience full of academics. And it was a panel of community members talking about what they wanted to see the site be, and the woman who moderated it was really cool. She was from an organization called Sites of Conscience, which is like a historic site museum group that makes you think about, lots of different existential things. But she said at there were lots of weird takes from this conference, but the one thing that struck me, and it goes back to what that woman asked was, wouldn't the moderator said, wouldn't it be great if an NRA member could sit at a table across from a mom who just lost their kid to gun violence? And everyone in the room was like, yeah, oh, that would be so great. And I wrote in my notebook, why isn't that the same person? Like, why can't that be the same person?
Yeah,
And that, was a moment of like, people don't understand there is empathy. I mean, we've been talking shit
correct,
about all the assholes, but that, those are outliers in some respects. But,
correct.
there is a belief outside, of the gun world, people that don't like guns, or people, and not even people who don't like guns. I mean, I don't think the gun community, industry, whatever the hell it is, understands that, no, like average people, like who don't understand guns, know guns, think about guns, they hear and listen to the other side more than they're going to listen to gun people. They believe gun people are not empathetic. And that's, so it's not just your like super hardcore
Correct.
moms demand action person. It is like the
Correct.
normal person
Correct.
has heard that, because moms demand will say, we care about our children,
Correct.
and then the NRA will come out and be like, you know what, we're just going to piss off a bunch of gun control people, like, and you hear it and you're like, you're not
Correct.
helping outside of the community, you're not recognizing that while we beat each other up or try to fear monger each other into buying guns and doing stuff, like the rest of the world, we'll call it 2/3, right? The pro gun, anti gun, middle, we'll just call it 2/3, is sitting there looking at you, not understanding that you can have a traumatic experience with a gun and have it make you want to carry.
Correct.
And that was like such a mind blowing, probably not the right word, but like it was like, you know,
Yeah.
that's terrible. Now I'm the asshole. But it was such a shocking thing for me that like somebody that was so intellectually considerate in the way they moderated missed that
Correct.
they couldn't see that
Correct.
was like scary to me
Correct.
because it made me realize that people don't see the gun world the way the gun world wants to be seen, because all they hear are sound bites from talking heads, and the talking heads on the other side tend to be talking about safety, whatever that
Correct.
means, or crime and things like that. And other people are on the gun side are talking about, look how cool my gun is, and your gun might be cool,
Yeah.
but how are people outside in the community viewing you? Um,
Correct.
so it's I don't know, I'm not solving any world's problems, but it
It's
does frustrate me when people don't see what I see when I see the good. And it's like there's a lot more nuance going on in there, and outside of the gun world, nobody really seems to get it. And even like inside, like if you take the gun owners that are just gun owners because they have a gun, right, and don't do
correct.
anything, they tend to fall. I put them outside of that world. They
Correct.
like those people are crazy.
Correct.
Crazy.
That lady's name, her name was Nelba.
Yeah, she
Nelba.
was great. I thought she was really, really interesting.
Well, and this is where I always like to separate. Now I'm going to call it the machine, just because you call it the machine. The machine
I'm raging.
and the humans who happen to own guns. Because one of the things she brought out, and it's her story, but I think she's been pretty public about this. I don't think we're saying anything that we're not supposed to. And I'm only careful about saying stuff that happened in that room out of respect for Emmy Betts and the Fippy team
Oh,
because they've
yeah,
always
right.
been.
Did I say
Uh,
too much?
no, no, no,
Okay.
no, absolutely not.
I
Not
forgot about that.
no, 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 absolutely not. But the only reason I haven't mentioned the industry guy's name is out of respect for. I hate to say this. It's not even out of respect for him. It's more out of respect for Dr. Emmy Betts and the Fippy team more than anything else.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we should be scared to let people know that we were in the room advocating for the position we believe in. Like that's
Yeah.
that's probably something we should be more open about. Is not
And
be
that, I
afraid.
guess, gets to the root of the problem in the gun
Yeah.
world. If you're
Correct.
afraid to be seen in the room,
Correct.
what is that like? What does that say about the
Correct.
community at large?
Correct. Exactly. But at the same time, Nelba highlighted that the gun owners were actually very empathetic with her, and she actually formed a lot of more meaningful relationship with gun people than she did with the other people who, and you were in the room, so correct me if I'm wrong, were probably more interested in raising money off of her story instead of.
Yes. Yeah. No, that was definitely.
So
Yeah.
I do want to get her on the podcast to talk about that, because that was interesting. I do see that a lot in our world, in our space, right? There's a lot of survivors of Columbine here in the state of Colorado that will always get pulled to raise money for 2A organizations, and it's always during like right now you don't hear about any of these survivors at all, Columbine survivors, and I think there was one in Parkland. The
Yeah.
dad wrote a book and all that stuff. Good guy. But like right now, it's not election season. It's not any of that stuff. So like you're not hearing them. But the NAGRs of the world and the all of that stuff will bring them out come election season to talk about. So in other words, raising money off of their stories,
Yeah. Yeah. I
which
thought it was
is
really powerful. Yeah. That she had, was pretty clear with the university she's working for now that that was not what she was coming on board for.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, for sure. Well, is there anything else? There's so much shit that I wanted to talk about, but this shit just fucking went all kinds of places, which I'm happy about. But
That's a
I'm
I
at a go
I
ahead.
would like to point out the mug I've been drinking from because it is like my favorite thing. Let me see if I can get it outside of the
Official cock inspector. Official cock inspector. You got it. Is that what it
so
says?
yes, official cock inspector. Because the mechanism on an old gun that people consider the hammer, which it's not the hammer. There's another part that's considered the hammer, but it's called a cock. And people in my world are children, and we have lots of cock jokes. And I
That's
have a hat.
hilarious.
And what's fantastic about this was a logo created by someone from Antiques Roadshow. So like
Okay.
people think that like the antique firearms people are like, oh, they must be stuffy. When I met the curator of Colonial Williamsburg's arms department the first time, he's like, I'm a Eastern European punk rock Jew. He used to have like a piercing
Correct.
with like a chain.
Yeah.
That's not who you would expect. And we're actually pretty foul. Lots of fart jokes, lots of swearing. It's pretty
I
good.
I
But
brought this up to a doc. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, no. I was just saying that this is my like. I love this. I actually almost brought this to the conference because I like to drink at places to see if
Oh,
people know
you
where
should
I'm
have.
drinking from.
You should have. So I stuck around for the entire conference. I was there Monday through Friday. I thought
I
you were
had
going to
my
be
own
there.
conference. I had to
Yeah.
leave.
So stuck around, and on Friday I was in the lobby and I was talking to one of the doctors that were there. And here I am, fucking barely got my MBA, and online, by the way, after dropping out of high school, getting married at 15, 3 kids by the time I was 21, all that shit. So I did it all backwards. I wouldn't consider myself educated in the academic sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't worry.
yeah,
There's a lot of people that
correct,
don't consider the academics educated.
correct.
So
So I was talking to one of the doctors that were there, PhD, not MD, and I think most people kind of understand that. And I told him, I was like, I forget you guys are human. Like because everybody was out drinking the night before, and they were having conversation about stumbling in at 2 o'clock in the morning and getting ready to prepare. And I was like, I forget you guys are real. Like you guys are actually fucking human beings. You
yeah.
academic types. He's
And
like, "Oh,
they do the same about you. So,
probably,
yeah.
probably, and I think that's the importance. If we get anything out of this conversation, it's that is that humans are incredibly nuanced, and we got this out of that symposium. It's so we want to pigeonhole people to one little box and put them in this one little box, and we know this. We're so complex, and we're so there's much more to a human than just you're a gun owner, you're a mental health advocate, you're an educator, whatever the case may be. And I don't know, it's super complex. We're complex humans.
I think we need to start seeing people as humans, like that's that's like a Hallmark card. But we've lost the human out of so much of the debate, and that's a really scary place to be. I mean, that's when, I said like, I wasn't a person to the people that were coming after me. And I always said
Yeah,
if they're gonna come after me, like who's been the most apolitical person probably in the
yeah,
history of this conversation, they can come after they can just try to destroy anybody, but there
yeah,
was no seeing me as a human, and
correct.
in my interview I said, the thing that pulled me out of my funk was the fact that I realized that everyone was going to keep pushing on me and dehumanizing me until I wasn't around anymore. And the second I wasn't around, both sides were going to be more than happy to use me as a statistic to advance
Correct.
their, agenda.
Correct.
And I'm like, and that's fucked up. But that's
It
what pulled
is.
me out of it because I was like, nobody's going to care. I mean, my family will care, but like,
Correct.
in the grand scheme of things, these people will then turn and focus on somebody else and push somebody else to do it.
Yeah,
And then they'll use that statistic and then we'll keep pushing and pushing and
correct.
pushing. And so I think like we need to start seeing people out of this, like I'm gonna here's something really controversial, but Shannon Watts is a person, like the people we hear, Wayne LaPierre is a person. That might even be more controversial, but like didn't say.
Well, it's so funny. I don't know what PBS is going to do with this, but I participated in a documentary with PBS, and I don't know even know if they're going to exist, but it's supposed to come out in February. This documentary, and a big part of this conversation was myself and two other humans. They did individual interviews, and then they did an interview with all three of us together. And a big portion of this was me trying to tell this human not to use certain words because people were going to attack her in the comments.
Yeah.
Um, and this is a human. I sit on the board with her on many things, and if we are at the Capitol, we're enemies. If we're at the Capitol, but outside of the Capitol, it's just like you're just this human that doesn't agree with me on one topic, and but I found myself super protective over this human that I vehemently disagree with. Like I will never agree with her on any legal stuff, on any policy issues. But as a parent, she lost her kid. And somebody shot her kid, and her kid died. And I'm a parent who has a kid that almost died, and I'll probably cry. But I always have that luxury of saying my kid almost died. And there's a lot of parents that don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
So, and I think we forget that it's just like that's tough to yell at somebody who had to bury a child.
Yeah.
Um, and sure, I don't agree with any of these humans from a political sense, and we may get tired of having the same old rhetoric. And yeah, I've heard that before, and I've heard that story before. But I think if I buried a kid, I'd probably have the same fucking story over and over and over again. Um, and I think we kind of forget that yes, guns are important to our culture and our sovereignty and our sovereignty. I'm Mexican, so like some of these words are fucking tough for me. For my autonomy, I'll say that one. For my autonomy, super important. I get it, but at the end of the day, guns or no guns, is like we have to live with each other. And I know this turned into this fucking cliche, cheesy
Everybody
1990
needs
sitcom.
to get along.
Yeah, for sure. Can't we all just get along?
Can we all just get along?
But as cliche as it is, it's so much. It's so true, because again, even if we disagree with each other, we get to a point where we understand the why we disagree with each other, and we can have better conversations to find the solution to whatever problem there might be.
Yeah, that was
Um,
profound.
It sounded awesome in my head, anyways. Um, is there anything else that you want to hash out, talk about, yell at?
Um,
Uh,
not yell. I'm not a big yeller. I'm
yeah,
loud, but I'm not a big
yeah.
yeller. Uh,
I want to be respectful of your time, and we're approaching the 2 hour mark. We
we're
definitely
approaching
don't.
my bedtime.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to be respectful of your time.
Uh,
Uh,
I don't know. I mean, there's always stuff that we can talk about, but
no,
it's not
I
as
don't want to force the
existential.
conversation. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
want to force the conversation. So
Would you like a lecture on the history of cocks?
I actually did. I actually did. Um, it's so fascinating.
Yeah,
Eh,
there's all kinds. So the curator of Colonial Williamsburg actually, like, he's written books about brown bess muskets and stuff, and he uses like chubby cocks, robust cocks. Like he uses every single word to describe the shape and size of a cock. And there's and then I love that people have a sense of humor too, because there's like on some old guns, gun makers will put a cock on the cock. So it's a cock on a cock. Not a dick though, like a bird.
yeah, a
But
rooster.
the implication is still there.
Is it a
I have
rooster on the
not
cock?
I have not seen a cock with a dick on it, but I feel like there's a market for it, and I will be bringing it up in my next gun collector meeting.
That's a good fundraiser.
Oh my god, how have I never thought about this
That's a
before?
yeah,
This
there
is
you
gonna
go.
be this is gonna
I
be gold. I
I
will finally raise that money. I will sell some for you too.
that's incredible. Uh, Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your knowledge. I appreciate what you do, and I'm looking forward to genuinely looking forward to not just because you're on the podcast, but I'm genuinely looking forward to where your program goes, and I hope it continues getting funded. Is there a way people can donate to that directly, or is it?
Yeah. Excuse me. I got choked up on that one. So if you want more information on the Firearms Research Center and the grant, you can just go to our website, which is firearmsresearchcenter.org. So super difficult to remember. And you can learn more about the grant, but there's also a ton of stuff on that website. We have got an active forum. We publish working papers. We've currently got a database for briefs. We've got a brief bank. We've got a suicide prevention page. There's a lot of stuff on there. And the grant, we just put a tab for the grant, and so there'll be more information coming. Oh, look at that. It's a very nice website. That was a weird picture. That was a weird video. I never looked at my site for this long. There it is, Armed with Knowledge. Sign up. But you can also donate to the center directly from that. So the initiative is actually, I mean, it's already funded by the grant, but we're always looking for funding for all of our other operations, because just because we're doing this grant doesn't mean that we halt all of our other projects. So if you want to donate, yeah, just go to firearmsresearchcenter.org. I think we're Firearms Research on Instagram, something like that on Twitter, X. There we go. You can just click on
Yeah,
those.
firearms
Um,
research, and on X, you guys are UWYO, University of Wyoming, I'm assuming,
yeah.
underscore firearms. And on Facebook, you guys are firearms research as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't think we could get Firearms Research on X, but you can follow what we're doing. And then if you're interested in occasional history, but like mostly videos of my dogs playing in the snow and what I had for dinner, you can follow me at History and Heels on Instagram.
History and heels. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time, and maybe we can meet your bedtime.
Yeah,
Maybe.
maybe. Will you be at SHOT?
I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. Those.
Uh,
Yeah, well,
that was
whatever.
fantastic. I didn't catch that quick enough. I wanted to do a snipping tool on that, but
Oh, do it, do it, do it.
I can't. How do I make it big again? There. Okay, I'm gonna do a
Well,
screen
that's
grab.
that. Speaking of cogs, how do you make it big again? There you go.
All right. Okay, smile so you don't look weird.
I always look weird. You get it?
Got it. It's perfect. I will send it to you.
I appreciate you. Thanks a lot.